Hello, everyone. Welcome to my presentation on servant leadership. In this short video, I would like to share with you some aspects of servant leadership as discussed by Peter Northouse in his book, Leadership Theory and Practice. Here I have an outline, provide a brief description of this approach. We're going to look at the common elements of servant leadership. We're going to discuss a model of servant leadership, and then we're going to look at some lessons learned. And servant leadership, it's one of my favorite approaches to leadership, in that it kind of goes counter to the traditional view or traditional understanding of leadership. And we turn the pyramid upside down. If you think in terms of the traditional view of leadership, that leaders are on top and followers are at the bottom, and leaders lead and followers follow. When we talk about servant leadership, we are turning the pyramid upside down. In other words, leaders are at the bottom and followers are at the top. And the role of a leader is to help followers grow and succeed. It's a leader-centered approach. It focuses on who leaders are and how they behave. And it was first proposed by Robert Greenleaf in the 1970s. After a 40-year career in corporate America, he started to reflect on his experiences and felt like leaders and organizations were not doing enough to help followers grow and succeed, and maybe create better organizations and better communities. And he started writing on different aspects of servant leadership. So his idea behind servant leadership is that servant leadership starts with the desire to serve first and put the interest of others before the interest of leader. Here are 10 characteristics of servant leadership from Greenleaf's writing. So Spears reviewed his writings and came up with these 10 characteristics. The first one is that servant leaders tend to be good listeners. So listening is an important aspect of the behavior of a servant leader. So in the communication with followers, so if we look at servant leadership from the relational perspective, the relationship between leaders and followers, so leaders or servant leaders must be good listeners to engage in active listening. Also, they should show empathy. In other words, they should put themselves in the shoes of another person and really try to understand the perspective of that person. Also, servant leaders engage in healing. So as a servant leader in an organization, leaders should go beyond just what's happening in organizational settings and maybe understand if an individual employee is going some personal issues and try to help that individual deal with those issues. Servant leaders also have a high degree of awareness, self-awareness, and situational awareness. So this is an element from emotional intelligence. So good leaders overall tend to have or should have a great degree of self-awareness, situational awareness, but it's even more important from a servant leadership perspective. They should engage in persuasion. So Robert Greenleaf was against using coercion and relationship between leaders and followers. And he suggested that leaders should develop good communication skills, especially persuasion skills. Conceptualization is another element of servant leadership behavior. In other words, servant leaders must have a good understanding of complexities of organization. We talked in the video on leadership skills about conceptual skills. Again, this is related to actually engaging and conceptualizing, really understanding how different parts of the organization work and how do we prepare organization for the future. And this is foresight. It's related to conceptualization. In other words, servant leaders tend to know what to anticipate and prepare their organizations or their units to deal with what's coming up. Stewardship, it's another element of servant leadership. Here we're saying that servant leaders have the responsibility to take care of what's entrusted to them in terms of resources. And servant leaders have a commitment to the growth of people. That's why, going back to his idea of putting others first, then they have to be committed to helping followers grow and succeed through coaching, mentoring, empowering, and then lastly, to build community. So Robert Greenleaf believed that organizations should do a better job creating better relationship among organizational members, building community internally, but then will have an impact on society as a whole. So those are the 10 characteristics of servant leadership that came from Greenleaf writings. Our other scholars have proposed various aspects of servant leadership from a theoretical perspective, but really there isn't consensus. If, let's say, Robert Greenleaf's writing were, I think, published over 40 years ago, the interest by scholars and to conduct empirical research, it's fairly new. It may be 15, 20 years ago when really scholars started to explore different aspects of servant leadership. So again, there are various aspects of servant leadership that has been studied, but don't have a consensus in this field. So I have here a table with some scholars that have proposed different models with different elements of servant leadership. Some of this model incorporates just behaviors, some incorporates behaviors and traits. So it's a combination between who leaders are and what they do. But as you can see here, if you were to evaluate the components of each of these 6 models of servant leadership, you see there are commonalities with Robert Greenleaf's writing. So, for example, Loeb in 1999 identified servant leadership, develop people, the share leadership, display authenticity, the value of people, providing leadership, and build community. So, or Dennis Bocarna in 2005, they identify empowerment, trust, humility, agape love, and vision. And Barbuto and Wheeler in 2006 talked about that altruistic calling, emotional healing, persuasive mapping, organizational stewardship, and wisdom. So see, each of them have some commonality, so common elements across each of them, but then some differences. So Linden in 2014 proposed a servant leadership model that has these 3 components: had the servant leader behavior at the center, antecedent conditions, and outcomes. And I would like for us to look at each of them because it provides a really bit more systematic view of the servant leadership. So we're going to look at with the element at the center, the servant leader behavior. So you see that there are similar components to what Spears identified from Greenleaf's writing. So the first one, conceptualizing, I discussed it earlier, and similarly to that definition is the role of a servant leader here is to have a good understanding of complexity of organization and then make sure that those units work together in order to achieve organizational goals. Servant leaders engage in emotional healing, so making making a whole. So they have to really put, leaders should put themselves in situations of followers who are dealing with different issues and try to help them overcome those issues. Putting followers first, again, this is the essence of servant leadership. It's to take that perspective of altruism that I mentioned a little bit earlier. It's putting follower first and putting the interest of followers ahead of the interest of the leader. Helping followers grow and succeed. And there's another element where servant leaders will engage in providing training and development, or mentor and coach followers, in other words, to help them grow and succeed. And behaving ethically, servant leadership has a moral and ethical a component, which is essential. So behaving ethically, it's important because they serve as a role model for others, and empowering others, giving followers latitude in terms of decision-making, allowing them the freedom and autonomy to complete their jobs, and creating value for the community, both at the organizational level and then overall the societal level. So Greenleaf believed that organizations or leading organizations should think beyond just the sole mission of making money and creating value for the community. So that's the core of this model. The second element is there must be antecedent conditions in order to have certain outcomes. So the three antecedent conditions here are context and culture, leader attributes, and follower receptivity. When we talk about context and culture, we have to understand the environment where a leader is functioning. So this could be at the national culture, or could be at the organizational culture. Here I'm going to focus mostly at the organizational culture perspective. So there are organizations that really focus on have that market-oriented culture where competition is essential element of their culture. And then some organizations have more of a collegial culture where there's more cooperation, collaboration. So we have to understand, because probably servant leadership will not work in a market really oriented organizational culture, but might work better in an organization that is more collegial. So understanding the culture, it's important, or the context. The second one, we have to understand the leader's attributes. So we talked about from the perspective of who leaders are, their traits, and then what they do, behaviors. So leader attributes or traits are important because there are some leaders who are predisposed to engaging in the behaviors that I just mentioned, and some are not. So leaders' attributes will play a role in that. And then follower receptivity. There are some followers who are not receptive to this type of leadership. There is research that shows some evidence that this type of leadership, it's not acceptable or doesn't work for all followers. So followers must be receptive. Some followers might perceive this type of leadership as micromanagement. And that's demotivating to them. So if these three antecedent conditions are present, then they will have a positive impact on the leader behavior. And then the leader behavior will have an impact on the outcomes that are listed right here. So there are three outcomes. The first one is the follower growth and performance. So when antecedent conditions are present, good context and culture, followers are receptive, and leaders has what it takes in terms of traits to engage in the servant leader behavior that we outlined here. Then followers will have higher in-role performance, and also not only in-role performance, but they will engage in the extra-role performance, for example, organizational citizenship behavior. At the same time, followers would grow individually as individuals, but one of the thought of Greenleaf was that followers will eventually become servant leaders. So there is some evidence from research that in addition to achieving high performance, followers will gain new skills that could transition into becoming leaders. And then the second one, it's organizational performance. So if we have high in-role performance at the individual level and some of the extra-role performance at the individual level, then that will translate in overall, either it's a unit performance and then overall organizational performance. So that will lead to higher organizational performance. And the last one, its societal impact. So since we have, especially the last element of servant leader behavior, creating value for the community, the organizations that have servant leadership as their main leadership models for their leadership development and practice in their organization, they will engage more in society and giving back to society. So there will be a positive societal impact. So this is the model by Linden that it has 3 components: antecedent conditions, servant leader behavior, and outcomes. So what are some of the lessons learned? Well, again, we are switching the traditional view of leadership with this approach. We're turning the pyramid upside down. Leaders become servants, and the role of a leader is to really put followers first and help them grow and succeed using different types of behavior. Again, it's a more of an altruistic view of leadership. It works well when there is appropriate context and culture. Leaders have some aspects of personality traits, and then when there is a match between who leaders are and who followers are, and then followers will engage in certain type of, leaders will engage in certain type of servant leader behavior, and that will lead to positive outcome for in-role performance, external performance for individuals, and then organization, society as a whole. So again, leaders should work on developing certain leadership behaviors. So we identify them, conceptualizing emotional healing, helping followers grow and succeed, engaging in ethical behavior, empowering others, etc. And again, there are positive results for individual followers, organizations, and societies. So I know there is probably some people think that this will not work in a market-oriented economy. We have evidence that of large corporations that have used this approach to leadership and their practice of leadership, for example, Southwest Airline, TD Industries, and other corporations that have achieved positive results. That's it for now. Please write and comments any questions that you may have. Thank you.